I hear these arguments. I've heard Democrats all week long.
Do not have passports. Many Americans, including white people, okay, do not have their original birth certificate or access to it.
You didn't say what you said. Rural.
I would love to offer the proof on this.
Yeah, because that is also relevant. It doesn't matter to me where people live.
I guess I have a little more faith in
do they have
rural
access?
America and married women had a document to register to vote.
Access to documentation of proof of where you were born or proof of citizenship is an additional thing that people
because
will
at
have
one point,
to do.
black people actually.
In today's video, Abby Phillip cornered Scott Jennings on NewsNight with Abby Phillip as a heated debate erupts over racism allegations, voting rights, and Donald Trump's record with black voters. Scott Jennings tries to defend the narrative, but documented history and policy impacts quickly put him on the defensive. So let's dive in and watch how Abby Phillip shuts down Scott Jennings on NewsNight with Abby Phillip.
Nobody has done more for the black community than Donald Trump. I am the least racist person that you've ever seen. I'm the least racist person in this room, with the exception of Abraham Lincoln, possible exception, but the exception of Abraham Lincoln, nobody has done what I've done. Look at my African American over here.
Tonight, just days after posting and then deleting a racist video depicting the Obamas as apes, which he has still not apologized for, Donald Trump took to social media to assure Americans he has black friends. On Truth Social, he posted videos of himself alongside Mike Tyson, Oprah Winfrey, Michael Jackson, among other celebrities. Here is just one of those posts.
Most of those pictures are from the 80s?
He's got a lot of black friends.
Dead people. I mean, Michael Jackson is in there.
I have met Donald Trump only one time at a cocktail party. He was coming to speak to the people I was talking to. Turned around, he's there, he introduces himself. The first and only thing is, I don't think he knew who I was at the time. Black people love me. That's what he's literally. He goes into this speech about he is the most liked person among black people. Everywhere he goes, black people are trying to convince him to run for office, and the only names he gave me were the names of celebrities. I went back to the Times and wrote about it immediately because what are you talking about? Who are you talking to?
Okay,
Charles, thank you for your service.
What are you talking about?
Can I just make a tiny counterpoint to that, which is there was a time when Donald Trump, back in the 80s, hung around with Mike Tyson. He hung around with Don King.
Yeah, but this is
the
same decade when he was calling for the death penalty for the
and he was in all these rap songs. I mean, he was, because he was this cultural figure who was perceived as rich and successful. There was like a cultural cachet there, which is not the same thing as him
trying to become president,
being exonerated from the racist video and all the other stuff.
Well, let's flash you up from the bottom.
But I will say,
that's what it was. Flash you up from the bottom.
Flash you from the bottom. During Black History Month, we're having this conversation, which is actually quite ironic. But you raise a good point. It was fine when he was over there just being a curator of culture, and it was kind of cool, whatever, to have him in your rap video. But a lot of people in New York, including somebody who's in that video, like Reverend Al Sharpton, they constantly talk about the lawsuits against him and his housing lawsuits, what happened with the Central Park Five. I want to be very clear, if we think about what's happening right now, he disinvited the only black governor from the governor's meeting in the White House.
In exchange regarding racial equity, voices like Charles Blow and Alencia Johnson resonate because they rely on public records rather than opinion. For example, the DOJ's own historical data confirms multiple housing discrimination cases against major developers in the 1970s, including actions brought under the Fair Housing Act. This law was enacted specifically because discrimination wasn't abstract. It was measurable in who got approved, who got rejected, and which neighborhoods were redlined. Claims that specific political leaders were uniquely beneficial to Black Americans often conflict with hard economic trendlines. While Black unemployment reached record lows pre-pandemic, this trend mirrored a broad macroeconomic cycle affecting nearly every demographic group. During this period, the Black home ownership gap barely moved, and Federal Reserve surveys showed median white families still held several times the wealth of median Black families. Structural gaps persisted despite branding efforts. Voting policy also remains a critical factor. Modern restrictions like stricter ID rules and proof of citizenship requirements statistically hit voters lacking updated documentation the hardest. Studies indicate minority and elderly populations are less likely to have passport-level documentation on hand. Civil rights comparisons arise not as slogans about Abraham Lincoln, but because access rules historically shape turnout. Process barriers change outcomes without anyone saying race out loud. Finally, celebrity proximity, such as photos with Mike Tyson, Oprah Winfrey, or Michael Jackson, is not recognized by policy scholars as proof of equity impact. Civil rights credibility is measured by enforcement, settlements, and reform support, the same way activists like Al Sharpton track it. Fact-based pushback shifts the focus from branding to verifiable policy outcomes.
He is actually championing a bill that actually would take voting rights away from a lot of Black people in this country, all during Black History Month, and then called the president, the first Black president and the first lady, monkeys and apes in this during this month. So this doesn't absolve Donald Trump of his racism. We all know exactly who he is. The reality is the conversation and the question should be, why do people continue to support him if they don't want us to believe they are okay with racism?
Wait, what voting rights is he taking away from Black voters?
Oh, if we look at
the SAVE Act?
The SAVE Act,
Are
that's
you
exactly
talking
what
SAVE
we're
Act?
talking about. That is actually going to continue to disenfranchise overwhelmingly a lot of people of color. There are so many civil rights organizations that have run the data. If we look at the way that it is going to disenfranchise Black voters, it's the same reason why Chuck Schumer called it Jim Crow 2.0.
So,
this is the same president. If we want to continue...
You haven't said how yet.
I am talking about it. It's the way that you're putting new poll taxes on this when you're making people have... That's what we can call them now. It's kind of an idiom, right? If you want to say that people have to prove that they are citizens, that they have to prove with a voter ID, the reality is you're layering what is a constitutional right for the American people and making it harder for people to vote in this country, and it's going to disenfranchise Black voters.
Concern you? You're making all these claims. You've yet to lay out how it's hurting anyone, but 76% of Black voters think we should show an ID to vote. 80% of Hispanic voters, 83% of the American people. Are you saying that Black voters are too dumb to know what's good for them? I mean, it sounds pretty condescending to me.
The SAVE Act is not
three-quarters of Black voters
who
want voter ID.
Just to be clear, the SAVE Act is not just about ideas. The SAVE Act is about
proof
of citizenship.
So what?
Women who've
I was just going to say, we talked about this before.
by the way.
It's not. It actually, there's an argument to be made that red state voters, women, poor white voters could be just as...
I know, you think they're dumb too, don't you?
Yeah.
What strengthens the side of Alencia Johnson and Abby Phillip isn't rhetoric, it is the policy mechanics of civil rights law. When proposals add documentation layers beyond registration, participation historically drops among minority voters. Political science research shows even small paperwork hurdles reduce turnout measurably, especially for citizens who move frequently or lack ready document access. Consider proof of citizenship requirements like those in the SAVE Act. Studies from the Brennan Center indicate that up to 11% of eligible U.S. citizens, roughly 21 million people, lack current government-issued photo ID. Furthermore, about 7% of citizens do not have ready access to citizenship documents like birth certificates or passports. This burden hits low-income and minority communities hardest. For instance, Black voters are statistically less likely to possess these specific documents than white voters. Regarding discrimination history, critics aren't pulling concerns from nowhere. Federal records document 1970s housing discrimination suits against major developers, alongside the Central Park 5 controversy and subsequent calls for accountability after their 2002 exoneration. Analysts evaluate these cumulative signals, not isolated celebrity photos, when judging the racial credibility of figures like Donald Trump. The pushback against voices like Scott Jennings focuses on impact over intent. Election law experts argue that access rules must be tested against outcome data. While many support ID in principle, support often drops when specific barriers are explained. The strongest arguments remain grounded in administrative data and turnout studies, not branding but measurable civic access. This focus on verifiable data is why these policy-heavy arguments land so effectively in modern political debates.
I mean, that's the thing.
Nobody
I hear these arguments. I've heard Democrats all week long.
Do not have passports. Many Americans, including white people, okay, do not have their original birth certificate or access to it.
You didn't say what you said. Rural
I
white
would
people.
love to offer the proof on this.
Yeah, because that is also relevant. It doesn't matter to me where people live.
I guess I have a little more faith in
Do they have
rural
access?
America and married women had a
Scott,
document to register to vote.
Access to documentation of proof of where you were born or proof of citizenship is an additional thing that people
Because
will
at
have
one point,
to do.
black
such a-
people
She
actually weren't even
describes it as a
allowed
barrier
to get
to
a vote.
It's a barrier.
It is a barrier.
This
Scott, do
is
you have-
this is
Scott, do you have your
exactly.
original birth certificate?
Yes.
Okay.
But at
This
one
is-
point, black
does
people were not
everybody
even
that
allowed
you know
to
have their
get
original
birth
birth
certificates in this
certificate?
country.
Everybody that I know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean,
But I know where mine is, and I know where my kids are.
There are elderly people in this country who are 80 years old, and they haven't seen their original birth certificate in decades. They would need to provide
this is
proof of
fear-mongering.
citizenship. in
This
It
order
is not
to
fear-mongering at all. It's not
That's
fear-mongering at all.
that's just a reality.
It's not fear-mongering
And
at all.
listen,
Jim Crow
here's how-
2.0.
Scott,
They say that about the Georgia
It
law,
is-
and what happened? Voter participation
Scott,
went
The
up.
fact
in
that you won't
Georgia.
Here's
answer
how
why you still
policy-
support
hold
a
on. Here's
racist
how policy
president
is
is
supposed to work in this country.
the problem.
And by the
You
way,
have a proposal, you look at the impacts of it, and you decide whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing to do. I think it is perfectly fair, whether you think that it disproportionately affects people of color or not, to ask the question, will a majority of Americans who want to be able to vote be able to access the documents that they would need
Yes, I
in
think
order
yes.
to prove
Clearly,
citizenship?
But Abby, you're asking
That's
the
your view,
underlying
but I'm
question,
saying
which is
people have
impact.
raised questions about
the,
that.
the reason that it works this way is impact. You mentioned Jim Crow 2.0.
No, I didn't.
What
Schumer, that's what
you
Schumer
just
called
said, the words Jim Crow 2.0, so I'm going to put it right here at the moment. And that is exactly the way that Jim Crow 1.0 was born. They took laws.
Democrats were wily back
Yeah, I
then.
won't finish. They took laws that were operational in the North, and they said these work on by the in the letter, but we're going to disrupt the spirit. They're going to take
we
these
gotta go.
laws
We really-
and use them on black people in the South
All right.
to disenfranchise them, and that was the effect.
Everyone, thank you very much.
In these exchanges, the support for Abby Phillip and Charles Blow rests on how election access works in practice. Studies from state offices show that document-based registration hurdles consistently reduce participation among seniors and low-income voters. For many born in segregated hospital systems with poorly archived records, obtaining replacement documents requires fees and travel, practical barriers that appear neutral on paper but exclude voters in reality. Research from the Brennan Center indicates that 11% of U.S. citizens, roughly 21 million people, lack current government photo ID. Additionally, 7% do not have ready access to citizenship papers like birth certificates. This includes rural and poor white voters, though it hits minorities hardest. Name changes after marriage further complicate verification, as administrators cite mismatches as a primary cause for registration, rejection, and provisional ballot disputes. Historically, neutral access rules have been misused through selective enforcement. Following the Voting Rights Act, several jurisdictions applied technical requirements in targeted ways until courts intervened. Today, Department of Justice records show that list matching errors disproportionately flag naturalized citizens and elderly voters. Administrative burden is never evenly distributed, a fact confirmed by decades of audit data. While voices like Scott Jennings cite polls showing voter ID is popular, experts note that support drops once the associated costs and error rates are explained. Reviews confirm that in-person fraud is extremely rare, whereas access friction is measurable and recurring. The stronger argument relies on verified turnout data and court findings, not assumptions about document readiness. This grounding in administrative reality is why these points resonate so strongly. Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out Ground News in the description down below.